Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Trail Talk Highpointing podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and the highpointer that we're speaking with today is Mary Montigy, calling from Texas. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, Mary, can you tell the listeners a little bit about how you got started in the outdoors and what got you highpointing?
Yes, definitely. So I started hiking in the outdoors at a very young age. My mother, my sister, and I, we moved to Maine, and it was a good way of bonding for us to get out in the outdoors. We didn't have a lot of money, so it was nice that it was a cheap activity. We started doing just kind of like hiking to a pond and doing some backpacking. My mom would ask friends to just kind of help us get into the outdoors because we didn't know anything about it. But Mom quickly wanted more. She wanted summits. She wanted just more. She didn't know exactly what she wanted. So she met a guy from work, and he was very interested in summiting. So my mom would go with him, and they would go and hike a mountain, and Mom would kind of assess it. Can the girls do it or not? Because we were pretty young. And then we would go with her if it was obtainable. So she went on Mount Washington with this friend from work and decided, I think the girls can do this. So we went and did it. And that person has become a huge mentor to me, and that's Stony Burke.
Cool. Now, a lot of the high pointers know Stony well from just being a prominent figure in the high pointing community. And what a unique connection that you have.
Yes, definitely.
How old were you when you started doing these climbs?
Well, my first high point was in 1996, Mount Washington, and I was born in 82, so 14 years old, 13 or 14.
Yeah. Do you still go out in the outdoors with Stony? Is he still a mentor in your life?
We are hanging out this weekend.
Awesome.
So yeah, definitely. I've done a lot of high pointing trips with him, and he constantly goes to high points. So it's easy to say, hey, Stony, I'm going to be at this high point. And if he's in the area, he'll go too.
Oh, that is so fun. So at what point did you start to think that you wanted to complete all the 50 state high points?
I would say pretty soon after learning what high pointing was. Once we realized like this is the highest one in New Hampshire, I instantly connected two and two and said, ooh, there's a highest in each state. I wonder if I can do it. And then I did a couple here or there with my mom growing up. And then I left for the Navy in 2000, which made it a little harder to obtain some high points. But then they moved me from San Diego to Washington, D.C., and I drove and hit every high point on the way there. So I got like 12 of them. Once that happened, I realized like I've got some momentum. Let me keep going with this, and just kept doing what I could when I could do it.
That's really great. And thank you for your service.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for your service.
Oh, thanks. I know that service members, sometimes when we have moves across the country or we have to travel for certain jobs, that we kind of bag peaks along the way, or at least I did. I always thought it was a good opportunity. And I'm like, you're paying me to drive to this place. Like, I'm going to make the most out of it. So then when you were in Washington, D.C., you completed all of the East Coast high points, or did you do those before when you lived in Maine?
I did most of them before when I lived in Maine, New England anyway. But the rest of them I'd get while I was living in D.C., and I would branch out a little more on the weekends to Ohio or Michigan. And then when I would get a lot of leave, my mom would meet me and we'd go on a loop and do like 4 or so.
Now, what was your favorite East Coast high point?
That's such a hard question. I'd say maybe Mount Washington, because it was the first one, so it's near and dear in my heart. But I also like how it's so obtainable. So anyone can get up there, and it's a big mountain. So like, I don't know, some of the other ones, Mount Mitchell, like you can drive to most of it, and then there's a nice ramp to go up. But Mount Washington sits so much higher than the mountains around it. So
Hmm.
it's awesome that anyone can get up there. You can take the cog, you can take the road, you can hike it. It's just so obtainable.
That's a really refreshing way to look at it because I know just from talking to so many high pointers that there are strong opinions about the way that you get up to a peak.
Hmm.
And at first, I was on that train. You have to do it the hardest way, or you basically just didn't do it at all. And then I got pregnant, and I thought, "Ugh, I need to drive as far as I can, and then I'll get out and walk." And so I think I have a little more empathy for people who choose that route. Whether or not they have to, or if they just choose it because they want to. You know,
Hmm.
it's a good experience either way. When did you start moving out west? Were you still stationed in DC when you were able to do more West Coast high points?
Um, let's see. I think I was actually stationed in Afghanistan. And I was talking to Stony, and he said, "Oh, well, what are you doing when you come home on vacation?" I said, "I don't have a lot planned." And he said, "Well, you want to hit up some West Coast high points?" So we went out to, there was a couple trips, but I think in this one we went to California, Nevada, and Utah. So I did that loop with him there. And that was kind of my first exposure to the altitude.
Yeah. How did that go?
It actually went pretty well. Living in Afghanistan, I was between 7,000 and 8,000 feet, and I lived there for a year. So by the time I came back, they said allow yourself 20 hours to do the climb, and I was done in 11. So it went incredibly well for me.
Nice. What's your favorite high point on the West Coast? Or out west, I should say.
These are such hard questions. I'd say probably Mount Hood. That
Okay.
was my first time doing technical solo. So I really enjoyed that aspect. It gave me a lot of confidence. And then also just the volcanic aspect of it. When you're standing near Devil's Kitchen and there's just all this like steam coming out of the mountain, and just to think like, wow, I am on an active volcano, or I guess they still call it not active. But just seeing that was so different from anything else I'd ever seen.
How did you make the decision to do a solo trip up Mount Hood? Did you learn skills prior to that on other mountains?
Yep. Couple things is I did Denali prior to doing
Oh,
Hood in
okay.
Washington and Wyoming. Um, and I did it through a school, so not a guide company that was pushing us. We were actually on the mountain on the glacier for 22 days, so really learned how to handle rope, and we would jump into crevasses and have to pull our team out. So I felt pretty confident through that. And I would have done Mount Hood with other people if I could have found someone, and I just didn't have good luck finding someone for it. So looked at the map a lot. My husband, who does high pointing with me, did halfway to the Palmer Lift, and that was the day before, so we could kind of scope it out. I felt pretty good and confident, got a couple hours of sleep, and then woke up pretty early and then hit the trail by myself.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Alaska Mountaineering School? What program was it specifically, and what exactly did you learn?
So it was NOLS, National
Okay.
Outdoor Leadership School. And to do a program with them, you have to previously do a program with them. So to kind of get your foot in the door, and then you can do the alumni trips. So
Okay.
the leadership aspect, they're teaching you those things on smaller trips. And then when we
Okay.
get to a big trip, like doing Denali, it's not about the leadership. So we have instructors that are there that they're definitely in those leadership roles. But we're doing all of our own stuff. We're having training instead of just hanging out in camp. We're getting together for classes I mentioned, digging the crevasse and taking turns jumping into it and pulling each other out. So there's a lot of just learning on the team. And that was like for me drinking from a fire hose. Um,
Hmm.
it was just like tie these knots and go, like holy crap. Like I haven't done that
Yeah.
before. So just having to figure that out. But for the team, we all wanted to make it to the summit, and we went around like saying what our goal was of being there and what we wanted to learn. And I made it very clear that my goal is to make it to the summit. Like, if we don't make it to the summit, I'll be back. So everyone knew that that was my intention, and we pushed, and 8 out of 12 of us made it.
Wow. So the course is structured as learning first and then summiting next?
Well, not so much as just learning, but being comfortable in the environment. So self-care was a huge thing, and I've hiked with a couple Highpointers, and for the bigger trips, they've commented on my self-care. A lot of people don't hone in on that self-care piece, especially guide companies. They want to get you in and out safely as quick as they can. And we were stopping a day to bathe ourselves, and it's on the glacier, and you wouldn't think that you'd have time to bathe yourself or that you would want to, but they would teach us how to warm water up enough, how to properly wash, how often you should wash. They would stop and say, we're not going anywhere until everyone cleans their socks and underwear. So we're all like, you don't want to do those things when you're living on the glacier. But they wanted us to get comfortable with the lifestyle. That was like the biggest thing of the trip.
That is really interesting. Now I have to ask you, as a veteran, how did that class compare to some of the classes that you've taken in the Navy?
Very different. The thing that made it so different was the majority of the people were 17 years old. So just like, they said they've never had a group so young. And I was 40 when I did it. So just the difference in just life skills, and they might have been better at mountaineering than I was, but it was just unique to have that blend.
That is interesting. I feel like you get that in the Army too. You get a lot of 18-year-olds, that could be in a classroom with you or something at some, I don't know, random course you have to take. Now, was that just an anomaly, you being with a bunch of 17-year-olds, or is that common in
No,
it
was different. They had just recently had these kids through the programs, and they have done all kinds of mountaineering courses through the last 2 years together, and they all said, hey, let's apply for Denali, and went through, and they made the team. Their skills were amazing as far as mountaineering went. So it was just the interviewing process and who had experience in what as to who they picked for the team.
Now, you said you have to take a NOLS course before you can be selected for the Denali course. What was the first course that you took?
It was actually, I was working with the Naval Academy. I was like a drill sergeant there, a senior enlisted leader. And they had just a leadership course for us to go on. Not many people got to do it, so I felt honored that I got chosen for it. And we spent about a week out in the mountains in Utah, and I was expecting like canyons. It was very different from what I thought it was going to be. So we would be backpacking, and we only did like 4 miles a day, but it was midday you would stop, and there would be an instruction that you would listen to, and then you would take turns leading your team that you were with navigating and just different aspects, and plugging in a little piece of leadership, and just experimenting with what your group feels, how you interact, and just like pushing you to try different things.
Wow. That is really unique. I think that's so valuable. Whatever path you take in life, that knowledge and those skills can really help you.
Definitely. And I took those things back to my job, and it made me more of an effective leader, because I was always the person who, we got to get this done, so let's get this done. And I didn't pay attention as much as to, well, these people have these feelings and they work best if you treat them like this. So it made me kind of realize that more, the personal aspect. And I was able to implement that in my leadership. And my last 2 years of my career were probably the best, because I was able to tap into that because of that training.
Wow, that is really unique. And now you mentioned that there was a kind of like an interview to be on the Denali course. Is that correct?
Hmm. Yes.
So is that a selection essentially?
It is, and every year they have a different amount of people who will apply for it. So they just go through and they're looking at your experience. Have you ever done any mountaineering? What have you climbed? Are you able to do overnights and carry your own weight? How do you handle yourself in acclimation? Different things like that. So they're taking the people who are the most experienced, essentially.
That is so awesome. I'm glad that we went on that tangent because I haven't, there's been a couple people on the podcast who have gone through a NOLS course, but I never asked them to elaborate on it. And I'm really glad that I did that. So thanks for all of that information. I think
Yeah,
the
definitely.
listeners will appreciate that as well. Well, let's get back to high pointing. So you do Denali, you come back to the lower 48 with a ton of confidence, I would imagine.
Right, and I was going to save Denali to the end. It seems like the most challenging. But when that opportunity presented itself, I couldn't say no to it. It just lined up good in my life to do it then. So yeah, then I felt like I had the knowledge. So let's hurry up and do these while I'm feeling like I'm top of my game.
What was the most difficult peak for you?
Ooh, the last one, Gannett Peak.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't expect it to be as hard as it was going to be.
Okay.
And it was grueling for me.
Mm-hmm. But did you do it alone or did you have a group?
Nope. I did it with a group. There was 3 of us.
Okay. And how long is that hike in?
It depends. So the trail we went the Glacier Trail,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about 60 miles round trip. So I had never done one by horseback, and I hooked up with Robert and Gordon Simpson, and he had asked me, "Have you ever done one horseback?" So no, I haven't. It's Wyoming. It's the cowboy state. I thought it would be quite fitting. So we took horses in about 19 miles, set up camp, and then we went from there on foot. So we went up to high camp, stayed the night, then we went up to summit, and then back down to the lower camp.
Wow. Would you recommend horseback to anyone else?
I would. I think it was a really awesome experience. But one difficult thing about it, sure, you're not hiking those miles, but for me, I have knee problems. So sitting on a horse for 11 hours, I had to keep stopping and walking to like stretch my knees out. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to climb after this. Like my knees hurt so bad. But thankfully, that pain went away pretty quickly after getting off the horses.
Wow. So how long total did it take you to finish all the high points?
It took me 27 years. And it took from, let's see, 96 to 2013 to finish 46 of them. So it was the last 4, the technical ones, that took me a solid 10 years to complete.
That's really impressive when you think about your time in the service and then overseas. I know it's so difficult to ask for time off and then get enough time to do an expedition or whatever style climbing you want to do. It's like the planning is just so much harder when you're in the military, it seems like.
Right.
And I know I'm not just speaking for myself. I think I've heard other veterans on the podcast say this, but for me, high pointing and just any other outdoor endeavor, it's like all I would think about when I wasn't at work and sometimes when I was at work. And when I would find out our training schedule or like when the block leave was, I'm like, okay, what can I do? What mountain can I climb? What trail can I hike? And it's a fun thing to just have. You never have to think like, where should I go? You always know what the next place is
You have a
or what the next
checklist.
mountain is. Yeah, right. You just go down the list. Are there any high points that didn't go according to plan?
Oh, definitely. One that comes to mind is Spruce Knob in West Virginia.
Okay.
I've done this 3 times, and third time's the charm because the first 2 times just were not enjoyable. The first time they were paving the road. So I follow rules, I follow signs, and the sign said road closed. So I said, okay, the road's closed. I looked at the map. I said it should be about 2 miles to get to the top. So I have my mountain bike. I start riding. I realize the brake caliper is stuck a little bit. So I'm getting a lot of resistance, but I keep going, keep going. And this is way longer than 2 miles. And I keep thinking, why am I not there? Finally, a car passes me. I flag them down and ask them to get directions. I'm going the right way. It ended up being 12 miles. I don't know. I don't know how I confused 12 miles with 2. I get there. I take my stupid picture because I'm like irritated. And I start going down the hill and I have to keep stopping because the brake is heating up. So this high point that I thought was going to be super quick ended up taking me all day to do. So fast forward, my mother, we've done many high points together. She hasn't done West Virginia. Well, Mom, I know the road real good now. So we start driving there and all of a sudden a blizzard, and it's bad. So we decided, well, let's just hurry up and we'll just go up real quick. We'll come back down. So we're driving up this road and I don't know, there's like a foot of snow on it. It's not plowed at all. We keep going. We're so scared we're going to slide off the road because there's no like guards on the side of the road. And we
Right.
finally get to this point that we're super close, but there's this huge snowdrift over the road, like bigger than my vehicle. So we stop the car, we put all of our snow gear on, and we hike to the top and then to turn around and get back down. So again, this took way longer. We were super afraid, going super slow. And then we slept in a parking lot towards the bottom. I think it was at church overnight just because we were like, this is so dangerous. We should not be driving in this anymore. And then the third time went exactly as planned. My husband and I took a trip up there, so his first time. And we did some hiking around the area because now we had all this time because we drove right up to
Mhm.
it and it went perfect the third time. So if you have a bad high point, don't quit on it. Go back and do it again to get a better experience.
Are there any others?
Oh, there's plenty. Like I said, the Gannett Peak. We were out there so long. I thought it was going to take about 12 hours to go from high camp to summit back down. And I learned the phrase benighted. We got benighted by the mountain. And I
Okay.
wasn't prepared for that. So people who don't know what that means, you spend the night on the mountain when you weren't expecting it.
Hmm.
So I didn't bring my stove, which I always do. I didn't bring like a sleeping bag. I just didn't bring the supplies to be out on the mountain for the whole night. We just kept pushing through and I had to stop and find water. It just took a long time and it was really hard to navigate through the snow fields and the dark sky. So that's another one that I would like the opportunity to go back and do it again.
So, how did you stay warm?
Oh man, it was cold. We just kept moving. We did have hand warmers, so we
Okay.
cracked those open and kept them in our gloves and kept checking in on each other. We'd sit down and take a rest and just get a little bit of a relaxing and get back up and hey, how's everyone doing? Are your hands warm? Okay, well, let me warm your hands. Just kind of looking out for each other.
And how many of you were there?
There was 3 of us.
Wow.
Always be prepared. Always bring those things, no matter what.
Well, that's what you do on the summit day. You just take a lighter pack, you leave everything back at camp, knowing that you'll be back there, by dinner or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good lesson. Now, I always ask 50 state high pointers this question. What's next?
There's a couple things that are next. One is to continue visiting the high points. So they
Hmm.
constantly change, and my husband's also new to high pointing. So I've really enjoyed revisiting with them, especially if it's the first time for him. And then we also we have two cats that we have that walk on leashes, and I realized like there's a fair amount of high points that these cats can visit. So now my husband is revisiting high points so we can bring the cats to them. And they've completed 10 now. Like that seems pretty good.
That's got to be a record.
There's actually there was a couple other people in the club that also have high pointing cats. And I think they'd done like 17 or something like that. So our cats
Okay,
have a
well,
little more catching up to do.
can you talk about some of the changes in the high points?
Oh, yes. One big one that sticks out to me is South Carolina sassafras. So when I first visited that, I think it was in 2008. It was a little difficult to find, but when you found it, you knew it. There was a concrete little pillar that stuck up from the ground about a foot tall. I did a handstand on it, took a picture, and then headed back down. And now it is this gorgeous monument that embraces the split of the states. So
Yeah.
they have a line going right through it, and you can stand in both states. It's really, really nice and complete. It's very handicap accessible.
Mm-hmm.
When we were there last time, there was these guys walking up with these big backpacks. So I don't know how exactly it connects to a long trail, but it does have an extensive hiking area if you wanted to go up that way.
Interesting. Okay.
Mount Mitchell as well.
Mm-hmm.
I actually went up there one day. That was another one that didn't go as well as I wanted it to. Driving on the parkway, it was closed down, so I went around, but I didn't go around enough, and my GPS rerouted me back to the detour area.
Wow.
So now I've lost like 4 hours of my day trying to get to the high point, and I got there as soon as it closed. So they thankfully allowed me to go up, but it was in the construction of building their monument there, which actually
Okay.
looks similar to the one at Sassafras.
It does. Yeah.
But it was all just torn apart. And then to go back a few years later and to see that monument completely put together and people using the facilities, it was just really good feeling to see that work come together.
Yeah. And again, I'm glad you have that perspective on it because a lot of people will say, oh, it's man made, it's crowded. And it's like, that's one way to look at it. But I think the accessibility that you brought up is really important.
Mm-hmm. Well, even with Delaware, that one's just like a sign on the side of the road. Um, if you just go a little bit further down the road, we found this really nice park that has a little trail that goes around. So it's nice to explore the area a little more, and you'll find so much around a high point. They really celebrate the areas that they put them in.
Yeah, you're right. So anything else on the horizon?
Yes. So another goal that I've had, probably established the goals at the same time when I was a young teenager, was to also hike the Appalachian Trail.
Wow.
So now that I'm retired from the military, all these bucket list items are coming forward, and I will start the Appalachian Trail on March 15th. I'll start in Georgia and planning to hike up to Maine.
Wow. Well, and congratulations on just having that goal. And I wish you the best. I'm sure you probably know like half the trail by now. So
Right.
would you say that just growing up in Maine, it's been a goal of yours for a long time?
Oh, for sure. In more so in New Hampshire because that's where we did a lot of our hiking. So I was
Hmm.
always so fascinated with the white markers on the trees.
Hmm.
And I don't know what it is about stepping on the Appalachian Trail. It's always given me this just amazing fulfillment feeling. And I've done a couple section hikes on it. 2 years ago, I did the long trail, which starts at the border of Massachusetts and Vermont, and you can go all the way into Canada.
Hmm.
So I did that for about 25 days just to see if I would like that lifestyle. And the answer
Okay.
was yes. And then after that, I couldn't stop thinking about the Appalachian Trail. So now is when it all finally is coming together.
That's such a good idea to do the long trail or any kind of, backpacking, serious backpacking before
Mm-hmm.
taking on an endeavor like the Appalachian Trail. For some reason, I just kind of feel like it's not a midlife crisis thing, but some people just kind of jump into it like, you know what I'm going to do? The Appalachian Trail. Just send it. And that's, of course, not the approach that you should take. And I have no doubt you will be very successful on that trail, just knowing everything I know now. And you've,
Oh,
like I
thank
said,
you. I hope
probably
so.
done half of it between all the high points and all of your hiking. And that's going to be so special. Are you doing anything right now to train for it?
Not really. We're actually in school. We're living currently in our RV,
Okay.
the beautiful surroundings here. So we are taking a school that is teaching us to be technicians and inspectors so we can not only work on our own rig, but be able to help other people. So that occupies the most of my time. I try and
Yeah.
wake up early and do a hike with my backpack for a few hours, go for a run. On the weekends, we find any trail that we can, but Texas, the east side anyway, isn't very hilly. So I'm doing what I can, just trying to keep moving.
Yeah. I mean, there's always a treadmill on an incline with a heavy back. Oh, that's awesome. So, are you a member of the Highpointers Club?
I for sure am, yes.
And how long have you been a member?
I've been on and off just because of the military.
Yeah.
And if I had that 10-year break, I didn't do anything at all. So I let my membership lapse. But then once I was getting close to retirement from the Navy and realized I can start obtaining these things again, I renewed my membership.
And have you gone to any of the conventions?
I only went to one in 2008 in Arizona,
Okay.
and that was the start of my cross country trip. So
Oh, cool.
I left San Diego, I went to Arizona, climbed Humphreys Peak for the first time, met up with Stoney, and him and I stayed together through Oklahoma, and then we parted ways, and then I finished the rest of those 12 to DC.
Wow. What's your favorite thing about the high pointing community?
Um, there's a couple things for different aspects. So the physical aspect is just getting out and having the encouragement in the checklist to know what to do. The community to help support you as to the maps and whether how the trail is. So just being active.
Mhm.
For the mental component, I consider the outdoors my church. So getting outside and just having that fresh air to clear your mind, it helps me focus better and I feel mentally stronger. And then the social aspect is in my job, I would have to connect with people. And sometimes that feels a little bit awkward if you don't have like a starting point or a question. So my question was always, where are you from? Oh, you're from Texas. Have you ever been to Guadalupe Peak? So it would always be a conversation starter, which was huge for me.
You know what? I never thought of that about it being a conversation starter. When I meet people, I'm just like, oh, that's where you're from. How interesting. And now I'm just like, why don't I ask them about the high point? I'm going to start doing that. That's a really good icebreaker. Except when they say, I bet the people that I talk to are probably going to go, no, I haven't climbed it.
Or people
And
will
then it just
say,
gets more awkward.
right, they say, oh, there's a high point of Florida. Like, yes, there's a high point of each state.
Well, that's my next question. What do people say when you tell them that you've climbed the highest peak in every state?
Yeah, I mean, some people think, wow, that's amazing, or that, wow, how do you do that? Like, that's so hard to do. But you just start with one, and if you don't finish them all, you don't
Yeah.
finish them all. But um, just going to all the states, I think, is amazing just to see how the different states are, what is imported or not imported, but what's exported there. You just learn more about the United States because it's just so diverse.
You're right. What are some of your favorite outdoor adventure books, movies, podcasts, documentaries?
So, there is this, I don't know if you call it a documentary or it's a YouTube video, and it's called Assault on a Mountain.
Okay.
It's about this group of men who are, I think they're paraplegics, and they decided in 1982 that they are going to climb Guadalupe Peak with their wheelchairs. And they do it unassisted. They have people with them to help them and make sure everything's safe. But at no point are they carried or put back in their wheelchairs when they fall out. And it's just so amazing to see what these men went through to show that you can do whatever it is that you put your mind to.
How has the outdoors and high pointing changed your life?
Well, it definitely made me who I am now. Like I said, my mom and I and my sister, we didn't have any money growing up. So it gave me such a close bond with my family that we probably wouldn't have had if it wasn't for the outdoors connecting us. And just the physical piece too. You see a lot of bad health out there and sickness. And I feel like it's the outdoors that are keeping me healthier and keeping me active.
Well, Mary, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on the show. Congratulations on 50 high points and best of luck on the Appalachian Trail.
Thank you so much, Lauren.